Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. You remember in a few videos back we did these kind of emerald green scales we're going to use for Bob's wife's knife, Jill. Paring knife we're going to make, and I know they're gigantic, but there's a method to my madness by making them way oversized like this, because it's hard to control, you know, just where your burns go on these things. They kind of follow the grain and do kind of what they want. So by making them way oversized, I can pick out the best area and like cut this out. You know what I mean? Cut out this best burned and filled section to make my, scales out of. Well, the problem with these is, excuse me, I used regular casting resin, and I don't know if that shows up or not, but look at, this stuff is still soft and rubbery. You see this here? I can just tear little pieces of that off. I mean, these scales are, look, I can, if I press real hard right here, I can put a thumbprint. I mean, this stuff just hasn't set up very well. When I did my stools, I did the stools with the same stuff, but it was 80, 85 degrees every day. And while I was home, I'd leave the garage door open. We had the sun shining in. They were all sitting right over there by the garage door because I had a big table set up here where I'd been working on my bar. So the stools kind of got set over there. Well, they had the sun shining on them during the day. It was really warm. And it still took those several days to cure up enough that I could sand them, that the material got hard. These here, for whatever reason, I've had them upstairs in the knife room for I don't know how long now. It's been a long time. I mean, I poured those, I don't know, at least a week and a half ago or more, and the epoxy is still rubbery. So I'm not going to throw them away. I'm going to keep them. They will eventually, I believe, cure nice and hard, and I can use them for a different project or something. But for now, I need to get this paring knife made for Bob's wife. I've got a set of scales over here that I burned a while back, but they only have one little burn down through like the center, and I want to kind of try to bring some other burns off of that center burn. So we've got our Variac and what have you hooked up, and we're going to try to do a few more little burns in there just to make that more interesting and more room to put some resin in. And once we get those burned, we're going to burn those now. Then once they're burned, we're going to dry them out in the oven for a little bit. We're going to throw them in the old vacuum chamber and get them stabilized with some cactus juice. We're not going to dye these. They're just going to be natural wood color. And then we'll mix up some more of the green Alumilite dye and in some, but this time we're not going to use the epoxy casting resin. We're going to use some polyester resin that my brother has used a couple times, and it's supposed to set up pretty fast. And so we're going to try that, get these scales made so we can get that knife made for her. So let's go burn some wood real quick. Thanks for joining me, guys. All right, guys, so we've got our Lichtenberg burner all set up here. I've already put a little bit of the solution on these scales, so let's go ahead and turn things on here. And now we'll slowly gosh, I don't want my arm to be in the way. We'll slowly bring up the power on this Variac and get it to start burning. That's been soaking for a while, so it should burn pretty well. Okay. That old wood soaked up that water I put on there pretty well. We'll just put a little touch more right here. And we'll try this again. The reason we use this variac, we get a nice slow burn across there, and that's how we get a nice deep burn. Because it burns nice and slowly. I'm just trying to get it to, get some branches coming off of those main burns. Because they're just not quite busy enough for me. I want a little more fractal in there where we can just have a better look. Give the scales a little better look once they're filled with epoxy and what have you. There we go, and we got us a nice little burn going here. And you see what I'll do on this low power, I can just leave it on, even though we've got a direct connection between our probes. The voltage is low enough that it won't blow my breaker or anything, which that's what makes this variac very cool. Without the variac, you were at full 2000 volts going into the wood, so as soon as those two met, if you didn't turn it off right away, it would blow your breaker. And with this set up the way it is, with the variac, you can really control your voltage. And even though we've got a direct connection, it won't blow the breaker, but it'll just you can see how that just stays red in between those two probes, those two electrodes. So we've got a direct connection going between them, but it's not enough power to blow the breaker, but it is enough power to keep that red hot in there and let that slowly burn, a nice deep burn into my wood, so that I've got a nice valley there in which to put some resin. So it's very cool. I really appreciate my brother picking that up for me. It's too light to work with the belt grinder. This belt grinder pulls too many amps, and so we've tried it with the belt grinder, and it just barely started to turn the belt grinder and blew the fuse. And I had to go buy a bunch more fuses for it. It only takes it. This is a 5 amp variac, and I've ordered a 30 amp. A 20 amp, I believe. I've ordered a 20 amp to go with this, and heck, the breaker's only 20 amps coming from the breaker box. So it should do all right with the belt grinder. But for now, this little variac that my brother picked up here that he ordered works quite well with the Lichtenberg burner. And I'm very good with that, because we need it with this too, because it's just, if you turn 2000 volts straight into that wood, it wants to shoot across there where you don't get a deep burn, and then it meets, and there's so much voltage there and so many amps, it wants to blow the breaker. And so we did a lot of experimenting with this when we first started doing this, and we had to go and turn the breaker off, reset the breaker a few times. So didn't work out so well with that, but it's working out quite well now with the variac. Well, now I believe we blew another fuse, which is very confusing to me, because this thing wasn't pulling that many volts. I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know about this 5 amp setup here. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I mean, we burned a lot of wood with this, and it worked really well. But now, yep. See, it blew that fuse. Again, we blew another fuse. And we didn't even have it turned up very high. So, it's going to take a little while to get that other variac in. ordered some things on Amazon last night, and I ordered the new Variac 20 amps. See, and this is only 5 amps, so it's just not enough amperage to do what we need it to do. And we just keep blowing fuses left and right with this. I mean, it's only a 5 amp fuse, and we just keep blowing fuses left and right. And what's funny is it burned just fine the whole time I was burning. It worked just fine. As soon as I shut it off, it blew the fuse. So I don't understand that, but and I don't ever mess with that thing, even changing a fuse or anything with it plugged in. I'll unplug it before I mess with anything like that. So now see, we've got a new fuse and we're burning again here. See, we turn it down. We're not pulling that many volts. We're getting a nice deep burn out of it here. And it keeps burning really well. But I don't get why it wants to blow the fuse when I turn it off. You'd think that if it was going to blow the fuse, it'd blow the fuse right now, you know, but it doesn't. It keeps burning. I don't know if that's showing up on the camera or not, but you can see there's a nice red glow in there where that burn is, where that fractal is going. And it just continues to burn really well. It's doing really nice. I'm getting a nice deep burn in there. It's very slow because it's on a real low current, low voltage. But now hopefully when I turn this off, it doesn't blow the fuse, you know? Because I only have one more fuse left. If that's the case, then I'm not going to be able to burn these like I want to, because it's getting kind of late in the afternoon on Sunday and I don't want to have to go to Lowe's or wherever to get fuses, so. Doing a nice job. I'm going to turn this down, turn it off. Now we're going to move. I'd really like to have a smaller brush to do this stuff with, but I think I have some small little paint brushes. Well, here goes nothing. We'll see if we blew our fuse again or not. Nope. So there's only a certain level that I can turn that up to, apparently, and not blow the fuse. So our fuse is still good. We need a little bit more conductor between there, catalyst. Turn that up slowly. Water's starting to boil on the scale there. And now we've got actual burn. And again, not wet enough. Okay, we've got a nice little burn there. We've turned it back down to a lot lower voltage, just so we can let it sit there and get a nice deep burn. Yeah, the problem is, see, my brother didn't understand when he ordered this how low of amperage it was. This particular Variac is only 5 amps. So anything that's going to pull more than 5 amps will pop the fuse. And we didn't know that. We'd never messed with one before. And so he ordered this looking at the voltage. It's 0 to 130 volt AC at 60 hertz. It plugs into a 110 outlet. And so we figured, okay, well, that's great. That should work fine. But we didn't pay attention to the amperage, and that's where we're running into a problem here. Is it's just too low of an amperage, and if you get any very much of an amperage pull on it at all, it'll pop that fuse. And so lesson learned. It still works for this. We just have to be careful not to turn up the voltage too high, or we'll pop a fuse. But as long as we leave it on a pretty low voltage, once we make that connection between the two electrodes, you know, we got to keep the voltage turned way down to keep from blowing the fuse. So, but it's just sitting there slowly burning. You know, that's a little red river going between there, and I'm not sure if that's showing up on camera or not. But well, I can't get it to zoom. Here, maybe we zoom with the... No, it's saying I can't zoom, so... anyway, well, I could go like this here, I guess. So you can see the little... you can see the little red deal in between the two electrodes. We're just keeping enough voltage in there to keep that hot and keep it burning, so we get a nice deep burn. And that way we've got enough room to put resin. You see how nice and deep the burns are that were down the center of that wood? And that's kind of what we're trying to get out of that. Low and slow. That's how we have to do it. Low and slow. So I'm going to go ahead and continue doing this. I know this is probably quite boring, so when we get these boards all burned up and stuff, we'll be back. Well, okay guys, after messing with these for a while and changing a few fuses and that, we got some pretty nice deep burns in these scales, and we'll be able to get a nice deep resin pour in those. See, the problem is, if I burn these too shallow, then I can't get enough resin in there to work my scales. I need to be able to grind them, you know, once they're on the knife. I need to be able to grind them and shape them. And if the resin pour is too shallow, you'll just grind it away. So that's why we need to get a nice low, slow burn. Look at how nice and deep those came out. We're running on a very low voltage, very low amperage on that Lichtenberg. With our Variac, through the Variac. And let me just give you a little bit of advice. If you're going to buy a Variac to use with a Lichtenberg burner or with your belt grinder, do not get one that's 5 amp. This 5 amp one, just, I mean, you turn it up hardly at all. Now, if I don't turn it up really much past 13 to maybe 20 volts, it'll burn this wood okay without blowing a fuse. But if I've turned it up to about 26 volts a couple of times to try to get it to burn a little bit faster, and it'll blow that fuse every time. So do not get a 5 amp. If you're going to get a Variac that you want to be able to use, get a 20. I've ordered a 20 amp. Now this one here, I've kind of got it figured out, and I can use it for burning this wood and what have you, because I've kind of figured out and played with it and figured how far I can get away with turning it up without blowing a fuse. But you know, that voltmeter on there just barely even moves. I'm hardly pulling any volts. Like I said, 13 volts is all I'm turning it up to. And so if you want to be able to really use the thing the way you would like to, don't get a 5 amp. Get a minimum of a 20 amp. Most 110 outlets in your house are going to have a 20 amp breaker in your breaker box. And so the 20 amp Variac, I think, is the way to go. This thing, I can't remember how many amps it pulls, but it pulls more than 5 amps, and the Variac won't even. You saw in the one video where I unboxed the Variac and I tried it on this, and it will barely pull. The belt barely started moving. You could hear the motor start humming a little bit, and the belt barely started turning a little, and it blew the fuse. So, and I had it turned clear up to. I had it turned up to around 65 volts on the Variac when it blew the fuse and didn't do anything. So that 5 amp, I believe it's overkill, just to protect the company. You know what I mean? They don't want you to be able to. I don't know. I just don't know. It's just a cheaper little Variac. So I can use it for this Lichtenberg burning the way I do it. I do it really low and really slow. A lot of guys see when they do Lichtenberg burns, they're not doing it to be able to inlay, colored epoxy or something. They just want the fractal burns on the wood. You know, it gives them a nice, it looks like a tree or something, and they make wall art out of it. And I've come across a couple of guys on YouTube that burn them and then put some resin in there, you know, some kind of colored resin and stuff, but they're still not doing very deep burns, and they're just doing a board. You know what I mean? They're just doing a piece of plywood or something that when they're done, you can maybe router the edges or make a clock out of it, or just leave it the way it is and it looks like a tree on there, and they'll put a little bit of blue resin in it or something, sand it off, and hang it on the wall. And but with these, you know, we're gonna cut these scales down to fit the tang of a knife, and then you know, when we fill this up with resin, you know, when I do knife handles, you know, they get shaped, they get rounded and shaped and what have you. And if we just don't have it deep enough, then we just wipe out the resin when we're shaping the handles. And that's why we need to make them nice and deep like that, so that we can get, even after shaping and everything, we've still got a nice resin inlay there for the handles. So yeah, if you're going to buy a Variac, get a 20 amp, a minimum of a 20 amp. Don't waste your money on a 5 amp, because unless you're going to use it on a Lichtenberg burner, where you just need a real low, slow amperage or something, that's fine. Then it'll probably work out for you. But I would just not waste my money on one. I would just get a 20 amp. The 20 amp that I ordered last night from Amazon was it was 100, I believe it was $119. So still not horribly expensive for the amount of uses that you can get out of it. You see, with that 20 amp, I'll be able to run my grinder. I can slow my grinder way down for like doing handle scales. This is a problem that I have with my grinder running direct drive right now. I have one speed, and I'm pretty well used to how to grind blades and do bevels and sharpen and what have you with it on the one speed. But when you go to start shaping scales or grinding, you know, some scales down or wood or whatever, it spins too fast. And unless you're using a really low grit, like a 40 grit, you know, on there, that really hogs the wood out. If you get into a little finer grit, 120 grit, it wants to start burning the wood. 80, 120, it wants to start burning your wood because it's spinning too fast. So I need a good Variac to slow this down a little bit to do my handle scales and some of my sharpening stuff. When I put the leather strop on there, I want to be able to slow that down a little, because the way it is right now at that high speed, first off, that leather belt is spinning way too fast, and it's almost acting like it's sharpening, and you're getting too much heat in your blade with it going that fast. You don't need that much speed for a leather strop. Number two, if that leather strop was to break at that speed and come around and hit me in the face, it'd knock me into next week. So I have had a belt break on this thing, and it was I think it was a 400 grit belt, and I was working on some bevels, and it was my fault. The belt didn't just break, I cut the belt. I had my knife up against the planting, and I tipped it just a little too far against the edge of the planting, which allowed that, and I had the angle up a little too high, which allowed the cutting edge of that bevel I was grinding to cut into that blade, and it just sliced it in two, and it came around, and it scared me more than anything when it came loose. You know, it made it pop, or it slapped the table or the bench and what have you, and it just more or less scared me. But that leather one could hit you upside the head and give you a nice big welt. So it's too much speed. So for the leather and for grinding scales and what have you. So I ordered that other Variac. It's 20 amp. As long as I mean, like I say, the breaker in the breaker box for the 110 in here in the shop is only a 20 amp breaker. So there's no way that I'm going to be blowing fuses, and you know what I mean. So that's going to work out a lot better. If you buy a Variac, buy a 20 amp. So all right, we're going to go and put these scales in the oven, dry them out, because we had to put that catalyst solution, baking soda water, on here to get our burns. So they're a little bit damp. We need to go put them in the oven for half an hour or so on a couple hundred degrees and let those dry out. Then we're going to throw them in the vacuum chamber with just some clear cactus juice just to stabilize them. And then once they're stabilized and the air quits coming out of them, we'll throw them back in the oven for another hour or so, maybe an hour and a half on 200 to get that resin to cure. And then we're going to mix up a little batch of polyester resin, green, kind of an emerald green pearl, just like we did those other scales, and see if we can't get that stuff to harden up, you know, in under a week and a half. My brother says it hardens up pretty fast, so it cures pretty quickly, and it's crystal clear, and you don't get a lot of air when you mix it, because unlike casting resin, where like my casting resin up there, those two jugs up on the top shelf, you mix equal parts of that, and it's very thick, and to get it mixed well, you have to stir it a lot, and which introduces a lot of air into the resin. This polyester resin, however, has just a little tube of hardener, and so you use the small amount that we'll use in the bottom of a cup to do these. I guess the more you use, the less hardener you put in it, which I don't really understand the science behind all that. But my brother was telling me for a small little, you know, maybe a half an inch in the bottom of a cup, which is all it's going to take to fill these, you have to put like 30 drops of this hardener in there. So at any rate, there's kind of a formula to it, but it's supposedly sets up quite fast. He's used it for a couple of projects that he's done, and said that that's the way to go. So we're going to give that a try this time instead of the casting resin. Now the casting resin, if you're making a big pour like we did on the river bar, that stuff, the deeper you pour it, the better it sets up, because there's more resin there, so it can heat up, get that chemical reaction going, and it hardens up pretty quickly. I mean, that river bar was pretty much hardened up the next day after we poured it. But the problem was, you know, it was such a thick pour that we had to wait a few days, but still, to make sure it was good and solid. But still, it sets up a lot. Casting resin, the deeper you pour it, the more heat it can build, the more of a chemical reaction you get, and the faster it'll cure. So when you pour it in this small of an amount, there's not really enough resin there for it to heat up and get that chemical reaction going, and it just takes apparently weeks, because those green scales are they're still pliable. The resin is still pliable, it's still soft. I can push into it and leave a thumbprint. So we need to move on. I need to get this knife up to Bob's wife. So all right guys, we're gonna go throw these in the oven and we'll be back. All right guys, got our scales put in our vacuum pot here, and we've poured some cactus juice over them, and we've got them ready to be vacuumed. So we just put our lid on here as such. kind of try to make sure it's centered. You don't latch it on or anything. The vacuum just holds that thing in place. We have to make sure that our vacuum line is open, and this is our relief valve. So I want to make sure that's off so that you'll hold a vacuum. And now we'll watch the bubbles come. Yeah, I was able to get some pretty good burns in them. I don't know that you guys can see them. I should have held off a little bit of putting that on there, but I've had these in the oven drying them out, you know, because you got to put that baking soda water solution on them. So but yeah, we were able to get some pretty nice burns in those. So our little cap is off, everything's set up. All right, let's make some bubbles. And there they come. That's just amazing how that sucks all that air out of that wood and replaces it with cactus juice. And you can see we're already up to about 24 and a half, almost 25 bars of mercury there. And it's foaming up pretty good. Might have to shut it off here one time to let the bubbles die down. I don't think so. I think it's only going to come up so high and it's going to stop right about there. So that's cool. Pretty good investment if you're going to be making knives and hatchets or anything like that, you know. I think this is like a 3 or 4 quart pot. And now we're right up to 25. And our bubbles are dying down already, so we're not going to foam up too high, so that's nice. We'll probably leave this pump run for, well, I don't know, about 45 minutes, and then there's our vacuum pump. I think that's like a 3 CFM pump. I don't remember right off the top of my head. Then you just got your little line that runs over, and plexiglass lid and a stainless steel pot. So there's that. We'll let them do their thing, and once those are inundated, we'll pull those out of there and bake them in the oven for a while on 200 degrees. Alright guys, so our scales have been in here for a while. I've had to work. It's been a really busy week, and so I've just left this set of scales in here because I mean, the longer you leave them in there under a vacuum, the more chance there is of, you know, the better. In other words, it's not going to hurt them any to leave them in there. The longer you leave them in there under a vacuum, the better they're going to become saturated with cactus juice, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So these should be quite saturated because they've been in there pretty much all week. So while I've been working and haven't really had time to do anything with them, so I just kind of figured, why not just leave them in there and let them do their thing. So normally Lately I've been taking my scales out and putting them in a pan similar to this one and just throwing them in the oven that way. But this time we're going to try wrapping them up in tin foil like I've seen a lot of people do. And I don't know if that'll make any difference or not. The other ones all seem to have come out just fine, but I mean, I don't think it can hurt to give it a try, right? So we're gonna try this route this time and see what happens. I don't really think it's gonna make any difference. They just need to be put in the oven for an hour or two to allow the cactus juice to cure. But I've seen a lot of people do it this way, so we're just going to try it for kicks and giggles. Don't know if it'll be any better or any worse. I really don't think it's going to make any difference. I think probably the main reason for wrapping them in tin foil is because most people have tin foil on hand. I picked up these little cheap little aluminum baking pans here from my local grocery store, and I've been using them and they seem to work just fine. But maybe wrapping them, you know, maybe it makes a difference. I don't know, we'll find out. But I'm thinking if it makes any difference at all, the only difference would be that maybe while they're in the open air in a pan such as this, that they can maybe some of the cactus juice is allowed to evaporate away. Where if they're wrapped up like this, it all has to stay inside the sealed aluminum foil, and you know, I don't know. So we'll find out. Stick around. Got our scales out of the vacuum pot in there, and you can see wrapping them up in that tin foil seemed to be a little better. You get some of this stuff hardens on the surface here and on the back also, and I didn't get that by putting it in a pan. All we got by putting them in a pan was just the bottom side that was, you know, if I laid them in the pan like this, you would get some of that on the bottoms like that, but not on the top. But wrapping them up in the tin foil, we got it on both sides. But the nice thing is I didn't get a bunch of it down in. See, the last set of scales I did, those green ones, I laid them in the pan like this with the fractal burn facing up, and so I have some of that resin down in here. But with these ones here, I wrapped them in the tin foil and I actually laid them in the oven with the fractals down, and so we didn't end up with any of that stuff inside of our fractal burns, just on the flat surfaces of the scales. So and it didn't smell. That was nice. It didn't smell in the house like it does when I just lay these in a pan. I mean, this stuff smells pretty bad when you turn the oven on 200 degrees. So with them wrapped in the tin foil, we didn't have all that odor, and I think it may have held more of the resin in. I don't know, we'll see. But what we're going to do is we're going to take these, and since we have this surface resin here and what have you, we're going to take them over to the belt grinder, and we're going to clean these surfaces up real nice, and we're going to smooth these ends up real nice. And then I've got some aluminum tape, and we're going to take that aluminum tape and tape the ends of these. Well, this end here doesn't even need it because the burn doesn't come all the way to the end, so I don't need to worry about this end. But on this end here, this burn is all right, but this burn here comes, you know, right out and so our resin can just run right out and down. So we'll tape a piece of that aluminum tape on this end, and then on this one here we have kind of the same thing going on. This end of the scale is fine, this burn here is fine, but this one comes right out the end of the scale, so we'll have to put a piece of tape on that end, and we're just going to lay these on a piece of parchment paper and mix up our colored resin and pour it in there. So let's get over to the grinder and let's get these smoothed up a little bit and get on with pouring our resin. Alright guys, we've got our belt grinder set up here with a 60 grit belt. Just more for expedience than anything. That should clean these off really quickly, and we won't have to be here for very long. So there they are, cleaned up quite nicely. We've got a little dust down in our blackened areas. We need to kind of brush that out. We don't want that in our fractal areas there. So that came out pretty good. That's another thing that I haven't done in the past. I just, on that other set of scales, and maybe that has something to do with them not curing properly, is the fact that I got cactus juice down in here because I put them up right in the oven first off. So we had pools of cactus juice that hardened inside of here that I couldn't get out. And maybe that played a role in them not wanting to cure as well. I don't know, but this time we got them cleaned up real well. Now let's go upstairs. Let's go upstairs to the knife room, and we'll mix up our resin and put some tape on these. We'll get these poured and we'll see how that works out. I've also got an unboxing to do today, a package that came in the mail yesterday, so we'll do that too. Let's go upstairs. Okay guys, we got our scales up here in the knife room. We've got some of this aluminum tape. I used some duct tape on those others, but when I put the heat gun to it to kill the bubbles in the resin, it wanted to melt that duct tape, and that's not good. So I've got this aluminum tape that people use on, actually do use on heating duct work, and it doesn't melt. It's actual aluminum tape, so we'll tear that off that way. And we'll just stick this over the end here. I think I'll like kind of mash it on there like that. Then we can kind of just tear off this excess here. And this can be used on this other piece. I didn't show it on camera, but this table was way not level, which I don't get. It's an old table. So I think that there will probably be good enough. Because like I say, we've only, oh, I've got that little part there too. I didn't notice that. This little berm here kind of runs off of the edge, so that's all right. We've got another little piece of tape right here. We'll put this on this edge. So instead of the there's a cup here, instead of the casting resin that we used before, we're going to try some of this polyester resin that my brother been using for a few projects. He says that this stuff, wow. I think I'm gonna have to go grab a pair of pliers to get that lid off. Resin down there. So he says this stuff, resin in there kind of dried it out. Man, this stuff smells like modeling glue. I can already smell it before I even get the lid off. It smells like model glue when I was a kid putting models together. We're not going to need a ton of this. Call that good. Yep, that's exactly what that smells like. You know, them Kester's model glue that you would use when you were a kid putting a model car together or something, or a little model boat or whatever your model of preference was. That has the exact same aroma. So there's that. Oh, I need to run downstairs and grab a stir stick. I'll be right back. I guess I didn't have to run downstairs. I had one in the drawer here. Here's our hardener. And what's funny about this stuff is, my brother explained to me, if this was like a full glass of resin, you only have to put a few drops of this hardener in there. But where it's just this small amount, you need to put like 30 drops. That's pretty crazy. But we're going to put our color in first. because we don't want this thing setting up on us. So we're just going to put a little touch. Oh, we have to cut this off. And I need to get my pearl powder from downstairs, so we'll be right back. Alright guys, so we've cut the tip off. And a little of this goes a long way from what I hear. Come on. So there's a drop. Let's just put one drop in this little amount here and see what that does. I say a little bit will do you. Holy cow, and they're not lying. That's just one drop. That's kind of a nice green color, isn't it? I mean, that's almost too dark of a green, but we're going to be putting it in a very shallow pour with a little pearl powder mixed into it, so I think it's going to be just fine overall. Now we'll take a little bit of this pearl. That's just white pearl powder there. We'll put us a little of that in there. I don't believe we need a whole lot of it. We didn't the last time. And man, this stuff really stinks the place up. I mean, this resin smells just exactly like the Tester's model glue that I used as a kid. Pretty powerful smell. Casting resin that I've used on various things, the bar, the stools and that stuff wasn't so bad, but this stuff, whew, it's got a pretty toxic smell to it. I'll probably end up having to open this window up in here. So I think that color looks pretty good. So let's get some of our hardener in here. I think we're going to put about 30 drops. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 25, 26, 27, 28. We'll stop at 28 and a half drops. A little half a drop fell in there. Let's see what that does. So we'll continue to get this mixed in there really well. I don't want to I need to get this knife done. I need these scales, so we really need this one to work out because Bob wants that knife. His wife and he are going camping on the 24th, and today is the 13th. So that leaves me 10 days to get this done and get it shipped to him, so, or to her, I should say. Yeah, this epoxy, or this polyester resin is more like using the fiberglass resin that I've used in the past to make my Carta. You just put drops of hardener in it. It's not like the casting resin where you go 50-50 on your resin and hardener. So there it is. I think it's pretty nice green color. Let's see what we can do with this here. We're gonna kind of overfill these because this stuff will shrink a little. Not a ton, but it will shrink a little. And I can already see that that's running down this way. So we're going to try to lift this up just a little right here, because we want these as level as we can get them. And we don't care if some of it runs off on that parchment paper, that'll get thrown away anyway. Okay. So I think those are looking fairly good. Now I notice it's running that way a little bit, so we'll just kind of squish that down a little bit there. And just kind of watch these things. I think this one's trying to run that way a little. I've got a little tin foil here. It's kind of easy to manipulate. I don't want that on there. And we'll stick a little of this under that end. Bring that up a little. And it looks like these are filled in nicely. I don't know if you can see it from the camera there with that angle, but from here I can see the pearl sparkling in there. Pretty cool. Let me bring you around here and see if you can see that. You can see the pearl sparkling in there as the resin settles and moves around in the sunlight there. Kind of sweet, kind of neat. So okay, there's that on our new set of scales. Nothing that we can do now except wait and let those set up, and we'll come back to those in another video, I think. So there we have another set of scales that we're putting together, and hopefully these ones work, because like I said, I got to get that knife out. So we'll come back and do another video when we put these on the knife and we get the knife made and everything. Hopefully they come out all right, like I said, because I got to get it done. So I appreciate everybody watching. Thanks for being here. We're gonna go do another video here real quick. I got a little package in the mail, so we're gonna go do an unboxing. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Be careful when you're working in your shop, but get out to your shop and do something, play around, fix something, break something, you know, clean the place. You know your shop's a mess, go clean it up. So take care. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. I'd sure appreciate it. We do all kinds of cool little projects. And maybe give me a like if you would. And by gosh, we'll see you on the next one.